All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D did a deep dive. The show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today we are going to be continuing looking at the Druid and focusing specifically on how you can homebrew subclasses for the Druid to come up with something kind of unique and taking inspiration from things that currently exist. Without too much more, let's dive into this. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this, please like the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and then hit the bell icon and turn notifications on. All those things super important for this video to get out to other people. Quick refresher on 5th edition class design. In 5th edition, every class is designed to play very differently right from the beginning. In order to do that, they have these things that we call defining features. A defining feature is something either unique to the class, or maybe it's not unique, but the class gets it earlier or can use it in a different way than other classes. And in order for something to be a defining feature, it needs to show up within the first 2 levels. So what are the defining features of the Druid? Well, they have technically 3 defining features, one of which is nothing is ever done with. Druidic is their special language that only Druids can understand. We talked about it in the previous video and kind of some of the ways that you can use it that people seem to undervalue. Yes, as a defining feature goes, it is never talked about in the rest of the Druid class. It is never mentioned in any other subclasses. If you want to make a defining feature around Druidic, good luck. It's going to be interesting. I've never heard of a defining feature built around a language, but I think it'd be cool. Other than that, the 2 other big defining features are spellcasting and wild shape. Spellcasting is not something that's completely unique to the Druid, but their spell list makes it unique. They do have some spells that are exclusive to the Druid. And like other wisdom-based spellcasters, they do have access to their full spell list every morning. They prepare a number of spells every morning from their spell list, unlike things like bards or sorcerers who just have, they learn spells and they have that set list of spells and it doesn't change every morning. Spellcasters for the Druid, they are full spellcasters, so anything you do that's going to make spellcasting different can be everything from just giving them new spells that they can use to changing how their spellcasting works in general. We talked about the Circle of the Land Druid and how it does that quite a bit. It gives them access to new spells, but it also gives them things like, I think it's Natural Recovery. Is that what it's called? I literally just made this video, and I can't, Natural Recovery. Shouldn't be that hard to remember that. Where they can get some of their spell slots back so they can cast more, and other things like that. And then Wild Shape is they can turn into creatures as an action. They have a limited number, or a limited list of creatures that can turn into. They have to be of the beast type, and there are other limitations that get a little bit less limited as they level up. When they get it at 2nd level, they cannot turn into anything with a swimming speed or a flying speed. When you get up to, I think it's 4th level, I can actually look at this. Yeah, 4th level, they're no longer limited to creatures without a swimming speed, but they still can't turn into flying creatures. And 8th level, they can now turn into flying creatures. And there's a max challenge rating. 2nd level, it's 1/4. 4th level, it's 1/2. 8th level, it's 1. So the Circle of the Moon Druid, the Circle of the Moon Druid modifies that. It turns their wild shaping from an action into a bonus action, and it gives them access to significantly more creatures that they can use, to the point where they can use it as an offensive ability instead of more of a role-playing ability. So those are the 2 ways that we've seen modify the class thus far. But druids are unique in another way in that they choose their subclass, which is called their druid circle, at second level. So because of that, sometimes their druid circle will actually add in a new defining feature. Um, and that can be a little bit confusing because, and I've mentioned this before, if a subclass doesn't interact with your defining features at all, the subclass is going to feel underpowered because it's going to feel like it's fighting against the base class itself. And at the point, if you are designing and homebrewing your own subclass that has nothing to do with the main class, or isn't interacting with the defining features, what you're doing is you're creating a new class, but you just haven't created enough of a class to make it its own class, and so you're kind of shoehorning it into the closest class that's similar to it. Which doesn't work. I've seen it many, many times, and it's not a fun experience for anyone because the class and the subclass fight against each other for resources, for time spent in and outside of combat. You're basically playing two halves of the same character and have to choose between them. So to start this off, I'm going to drink. I'm going to get more water because I talk a lot in these, and water is remarkably helpful. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about, if you look at it just from the features themselves, you don't think about how it relates to the other class. This sounds like a class, a subclass that is exactly what I described. It has nothing to do with the base class. It just seemed to kind of fit in there. But looking at it, we're going to see how it relates, and it'll give you a good idea on how to create subclasses like this, not just for the druid, but also for other classes that get their subclasses a little bit earlier. So the Circle of Dreams. The Circle of Dreams is a really, really interesting subclass because when you look at the features, none of them, most of them don't have anything to do with spellcasting, and they don't mention wild shape at all. So if you look at this, you'd think, okay, well, this obviously, this is nothing to do with the druid class. You could literally add this to any other class and it would work fine. Not quite, because you have to look at the exact type of things that they do. So the first thing that they get is they introduce a defining feature at second level. The reason I call this a defining feature is not so much that it gets upgraded by the rest of the class or anything like that. It really is not mentioned in the rest of this subclass at all, but it adds a new limited resource and because of how it works, this is something that you will be using every single turn in combat and a lot of times outside of combat. The feature is called Balm of the Summer Court, and effectively, you get a pool of Fey energy represented by a number of D6s equal to your Druid level. That's a lot of D6s. And this is something that I really, really like for subclass and classes in general. I wish more of these did this, where they give you a pool of dice. The size of the dice doesn't really matter. It can be a pool of D4s, D6s. You probably don't want to give them a pool of D20s. But I like having physical things when you're playing that you can go, look, this is how much I have, where you can literally get, for Balm of the Summer Court, you can just go, okay, I'm a 7th level druid. I'm going to get 7d6. I'm going to put them here, and that is my Balm pool. And I'm going to, anytime I use it, I pick them up, and I put it over here after it's just used, so I know exactly how many I have. I like that physical aspect, and it doesn't require specialty, things being printed. Like for a board game, you might get tokens or something like that that represent PowerPoints, but those have to be, die cut or things like that. This doesn't. Everybody's got D6s, and you can make them as interesting or as plain as you want. You can buy cubes of D6s where you get tons of them, and they can all look the same, or you can have different ones for different, it gives so much to the player, and I really like that. But basically, The only thing that you can use these for, and I think this is a bit of a letdown for the class because there's a lot of potential in this, and they just never do anything. But it's useful enough that they don't need to. But as a bonus action, you can choose one creature you can see within 120 feet of you and spend a number of those dice equal to half your druid level or less. Roll the spent dice and add them together. The target remains a number of hit points equal to the total. Target also grants one temporary hit point per dice spent. You regain all expended die when you finish a long rest. So you can never do all of these at once. The most you can ever do is half your druid level, but that's still, if you're a 10th level druid, that's still 5d6. That is a more potent heal than most healing spells that roll dice. That is a really nice potent heal. You can do it within 120 feet of you, which is an incredible range for a healing spell, and it is a bonus action. This is a really effective heal. Just, there's no other way to describe it. This is a remarkably effective heal. Now, because 5d6, like again, if you're a 10th level druid, you can do 5d6 twice. That is a good heal once, but you only get 2 of those per long rest. So this is not like broken in any way, shape, or form, but it provides you with a lot of utility. But again, Balm of the Summer Court, it's not a spellcasting thing. It's not casting spells. There's nothing about this that is a spell. It is just an ability you have, and it has nothing to do with your wild shape. They're introducing an entirely new mechanic to the game that doesn't relate to the class whatsoever. Well, that's where you're slightly wrong. Balm of the Summer Court is actually an improvement on your spell casting. Well, why do you say that? Well, druids can actually be really effective healers if you're grouping or if you're kind of categorizing your players into the holy trinity of tank, DPS, healer. To play D&D 5th edition, you do not need a tank, a DPS, and a healer. You don't. You don't need a healer at all. However, it's really nice. And allows you to approach situations differently. If you don't have a healer, doesn't mean you can't play. It doesn't mean the game is harder. It means you have to play differently. That's all it is. However, druids can actually make pretty effective healers because they get access to a bunch of healing spells. They get access to a bunch of really useful, powerful healing spells. But most of those healing spells take their action, and they require them to use spell slots that they could be using for casting spells. And druids have some incredibly powerful spells. They have control-based spells. They have damage-based spells. I mentioned before, in the previous video, playing a druid is hard because you really need to embrace that idea of a druid can fit into a number of different situations, and part of the ways you do that is by looking at your spell list, looking at what the day is going to bring you, and choosing spells accordingly. Even a druid who is normally the party's healer every morning might want to pick different spells because they may be in a situation where they don't need a healer that particular day, and the druid is versatile enough that they can change what they're doing and offer a lot of versatility by knowing their spell list. Well, Balm of the Summer Court means that they don't need to prepare as many healing spells. It's probably a good idea to have, at least one healing spell prepared, probably Healing Word, just in case they're unable to use Balm of the Summer Court for whatever reason and someone is about to die. Healing Word is really great about getting rid of death saves. It's really nice for that. But it also means that they can heal as their bonus action because they're not casting a spell. They can use their action to cast spells. I've mentioned before I loved leaders in 4th edition because of this. In 3rd edition and in 2nd edition, and I think in 1st edition, though I'm not as familiar with 1st edition, I know 2nd and 3rd really well. Playing a cleric got real boring. Because a lot of times people go, oh, cleric, they're the healer. And they could be. But that meant that they had to use their action to heal. And it was super boring. Like, everyone else was like, I run up and I take my massive greatsword and I kill one kobold, and then I cleave into another one, I cleave into a third one, I cleave into a fourth one, and then I cleave into the big baddie, and I just killed 4 kobolds and I took 20 hit points off the big baddie. Well, that's really cool. And then the wizard comes in, and I bring down the full force of the heavens and strike them with a lightning bolt that forks over and chains to 7 other creatures, and I kill 3 of them. And the cleric goes, I get rid of 12 hit points of damage from him. And that was all they got to do. It's really boring. 4th edition introduced minor action healing. All leaders had a minor action ability that allowed them to heal, so they could use their standard action to do cool shit. And I loved it. Playing a leader in 4th edition was super fun. You got to do cool stuff. Fast forward to 5th edition, they did kind of keep that idea in there, with Healing Word being a bonus action heal, but because it's casting a spell, you can't actually cast Healing Word as a bonus action and then cast another really powerful spell in the same term. You'd only be able to do a cantrip, so you still feel a little bit limited, and Healing Word doesn't do a lot. It's really not that great a heal in general. It's just nice that it's a ranged heal, and it's a bonus action, whereas Cure Wounds is an action, and you gotta touch him. Balm of the Summer Court fixes that. You can do a decent heal that also gives to the temporary hit points, and it's really, really cool. And it's not a spell, so for your action, you can actually cast a spell. And that's what I think is so cool. And thinking about this in a homebrewing aspect, because they get it at 2nd level, because druids get their subclasses 2nd level, you can add a defining feature. I generally recommend, if you add a defining feature as part of the subclass, which there are a few subclasses even for 3rd level subclasses that will add a defining feature as part of the subclass, you need to understand how it relates to the main class. And this one works really well. It works perfectly in tandem with Druid spellcasting. You are now freeing up their bonus action you're freeing up their action so that they can actually do cool Druid stuff, and they can use their bonus action to keep their party alive. This allows the Druid to be significantly more versatile. The idea of the Druid itself is its versatility. There's so many different things it can do, and this just expands upon that. So if you are homebrewing and you want to add a defining feature, understand it still needs to interact with the defining features of the rest of the class. Just because you don't like those defining features, or you don't think that, they work in the way that you want your Druid to work, doesn't mean that you can just ignore them. If you do that, again, the class fights against itself, and it's just not very useful, and it's not very fun. So this is a perfect example of, okay, I'm going to vastly change how the Druid plays, and I'm going to do it by giving them a bonus action and a brand new defining feature, which is this Balm of the Summer Court. But it's going to interact with their spellcasting by allowing them to use their action for spellcasting. Also understand, giving bonus actions to classes, you have to understand what they're doing with their action. If your bonus action is, okay, well, I'm going to do something similar to Balm of Summer Court, but instead of healing, I'm going to make it so that they can just give out damage. No attack rolls necessary, they can just give out damage. That gets real bad real quick, because that starts turning into, okay, well, they damage with their bonus action, they damage with their main action, they can out damage everybody. So understand where these things are going, how these things are going to interact. I've already mentioned before, healing is kind of underpowered in 5th edition. So this does kind of make healing quote unquote overpowered compared to what it is in the base game. But the base game, it's not all that great, so giving a boost to healing, theoretically, a Druid could bonus action and action healing and do lots of healing and be really, really cool. They're probably not going to do that. And even if they did, it's not going to unbalance things that much. Using a subclass to bring up something that 4th edition or 5th edition doesn't do super well is not really unbalancing the game as much as taking something that the class already does well and making it super, super good will unbalance the game. I know it's a little bit confusing, but as you play more and as you homebrew more especially, you start to figure out what things that you can pump up and what's things that are already really good and don't need to be pumped. All right, so that's Balm of the Summer Court. As you go further, it's never referenced again. The only thing Balm of the Summer Court ever lets you do is heal. And again, I understand why they did it, and it works really well. I would have liked to see them give something else to use the Pool of Fey energy for. And that's generally what I tend to recommend if you're going to add a new defining feature. The rest of the features of that subclass, as part of a subclass, the rest of the features of that subclass should interact with it in some way to kind of justify that you've just given a new defining feature. This defining feature, technically the only reason it gets any better as you level up is you get more dice because it's connected to your druid level. And that's it. Again, I don't have a problem with this. They found a really great happy medium where they could just introduce something and never upgrade it, and it never feels overpowered and it never feels underpowered. I'm going to say this is an exception to the rule, not the rule. If you think you can do this, you're probably going to be wrong. And if you are right, pat yourself on the back. You've done something very, 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 very difficult. Excuse me for a second. Excuse me. All right, so moving on. If you look at the other things that haven't, Hearth of Moonlight and Shadow, that is kind of an out of combat role playing kind of thing. It effectively just makes it safer for you to be able to take short rests. Druids are not really dependent on short rests, and Balm of the Summer Court is a long rest, not a short rest. So this is entirely something that makes you more valuable to the party, which again fits with the idea of the druid being that versatile, where does the party need me? That's what that does. Hidden Path gives you a teleportation, and it's a bonus action to gig again. So that does technically interact with Balm of the Summer Court since they're both bonus actions, and teleportations are just useful. And I've mentioned before, giving someone more movement does affect spellcasting and things like that because they can get to the spot that they want to. Lightning Bolt is a really, I wouldn't say really popular spell, but it should be. The reason that it's not as popular as, say, Fireball is because Fireball does area damage. Lightning Bolt does line damage. And it is significantly easier to get people into an area than it is to get them in a line. However, line is significantly easier to not hit your allies. The big issue with Lightning Bolt is you have to find a way to line up enemies so that you can hit them. Giving a 60-foot teleport allows you to line up things better. And it's your bonus action, so you can move and teleport, which is also really useful. The other thing that's cool about Hidden Pass is you can also teleport someone else 30 feet. So you can teleport yourself 60 feet. You can teleport someone else 30 feet, which again fits into that idea of the druid fits the position in the party that is most beneficial at the time. And Hidden Paths exemplifies that. You know, either I can move myself or I can move someone else to a place. You have to be able to touch them, but there's still a lot that you can do with that. It can get a lot of people out of bad situations, or it can get people into into bad situations that want to be in bad situations, like barbarians that want to be in the middle of the group of enemies. You can totally do it. You can go, yeah, here you go, Bruto. Psst, enjoy your barbarian. And then Walker and Dream actually gives them access to some spells and allows them to cast them without using the spell slots. So that's very obviously a way to modify the spell casting. So, yeah, if you look at the Circle of Dreams, it's a really good example of how you can add a new defining feature, and yet it still interacts with the other defining features really well. This whole subclass is super cool and super fun. Going forward, I want to talk about Wildfire for a number of reasons. First of all, Ashley Johnson is playing a Wildfire Druid on the latest season of Critical Role, so people are becoming more familiar with it, and it does something really cool. That is another thing that I think should be a staple of a lot of Druid subclasses, which is it modifies the wild shape without just giving you new things to turn into, which I think is cool. So First thing, Circle of Wildfire actually modifies both defining feature. It modifies the spell casting by giving circle spells, which is a very, very common. A lot of the post PHB druid druid subclasses will give circle spells. Not all of them, but quite a few of them. And it's a really simple way to work with the defining feature of spellcasting for them. But it also gives you Summon Wildfire Spirit. As an action, you can expend one use of your Wild Shape feature to summon your Wildfire Spirit rather than assuming a beast form. The Wildfire Spirit itself is interesting to say the least. Something that I've mentioned before here, especially when we were going through the Final Fantasy XIV supplement, is the idea of pet classes and how difficult they are to implement in 5th edition because action economy is such a huge balancing factor. The Wildfire Spirits is interesting for a number of reasons. First, when you summon it, you use an action to summon it. But when you summon it to a place you can see within 30 feet of you, and then each creature within 10 feet of the spirit, other than you, when it appears, must make a dex save or take some fire damage. So just in summoning it, it is also an area attack. It's not a super strong one. 2d6 is not a massive amount. But it does give you another reason why you would use it. You know, again, if you're dealing with some low-level creatures that just happen to be there, you know, summoning your Wildfire Spirit, do a little bit of damage to all of them, and then you also have this additional thing. Now, the Wildfire Spirit itself, you use your bonus action to have it take its actions. If you don't use your bonus action to command it, all it does is take the dodge action, and it lasts for an hour. So there's a lot in this that we can use if we want to homebrew something else. So first things first, action versus bonus action. Actions, you're going to have to, anytime you make something an action, your druid is going to have to figure out, is it worth not casting a spell or a cantrip this turn? So anything that you do has to be valuable enough that they can't do something better by just casting a spell. So if you are giving them something that just isn't valuable enough that a spell is always going to be the better answer, you can move it to a bonus action. Understand, bonus actions that last for a long time start to outweigh spells, and that's when you can shift it to an action versus a bonus action. This is an action because it lasts for an hour, it does damage, and it gives you for the next hour, which is multiple combats, probably. It gives you the ability to always have a use for your bonus action. And your bonus action turns into Flame Seed, which is just a d6 plus proficiency bonus fire damage. So it's just flat damage. Or Fiery Teleportation, which is effectively it's a teleportation spell, which not only affects the Wildfire Spirit, it also affects each willing creature of your choice within 5 feet of it. They can all teleport 15 feet. And anyone that's where the spirit left from has to make a dex save and take some damage. So it adds a lot of versatility to the druid. Their bonus action is either going to cause damage or it's going to move allies to a better position and cause damage. And then, again, it lasts for an hour. So this is most definitely something that is more useful as an action than more useful than a bonus action should be. So it definitely should be an action, and it expands what you can do. And that's what you always want to do when you're coming up with new ideas for homebrews in the D&D 5th edition. Is you want to give the player choices. You don't want to shoehorn them into this is always the right choice. The difference between good game design and bad game design is effectively is this a choice or is this a force? Choices means, hey, here's something new you can do. In some situations, it's going to be more beneficial. In some situations, it's going to be less beneficial. A force is literally that. I'm going to give you something and you're never going to use this other ability because this is always better. So you're only ever going to use this, and if you ever want to use this, you are going to be doing something lesser. You can call it a force, you can call it an upgrade, whatever you will want. Generally, bad game design focuses on forces or upgrades. Good game design focuses on choice. You know, giving the player more choices is always going to be more fun than just going, well, this is a better version of that. I'm not saying upgrades shouldn't exist. I'm saying if you can create a choice rather than an upgrade, the choice is always going to be more beneficial for the player because it allows them to do more instead of, no, this is the only thing you can do. So, as you level up, again, the as much as the Wildfire Spirit is not a defining feature, it modifies a defining feature, it gets upgraded like it's a new defining feature because it's definitely a different way to use your wild shape. The enhanced bond just gives you bonuses to damage and healing, so again, giving you that versatility. And you can cast spells from your Wildfire Spirit. 10th level effectively allows your Wildfire Spirits to either heal someone when something dies near them, or do some damage when something dies near them, and it has a limitation. You can use this reaction number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and it's based on their reaction. So there's 2 limiting factors in there. Limiting factors are really important when you're homebrewing. One limiting factor is your reaction. Using the reaction to do something is a really, really great way to provide an easy limiting factor. Because you only get 1 reaction per round. So anything that requires your reaction, you are effectively saying you can only use this once per round. You don't have to worry about tricky wording or anything like that. And it also allows it to happen any time during the round. Any other thing like an action or a bonus action or something like that can only happen on the character's turn. But a reaction can happen, technically a reaction can happen on your turn, but it can also happen any other time during the combat. So use reactions. There's not a ton of reaction-based abilities in 5th edition. And getting something that reliably allows you to use your reaction is incredibly useful. So if you're homebrewing, use reaction type stuff. And this Cauterizing Flame is a perfect example of that. And yeah, I mean, without going too much into how Cauterizing Flames work, because I don't want this to be me rehashing the Wildfire Druid. You know, something dies in its space as a little flame, and creatures can react to it effectively. If one of your allies steps into that place, the druid uses its reaction to heal them. If an enemy enters that space, and it specifically says enters that space, not moves into or anything like that, so it doesn't matter if it's forced into that space or not. If an enemy gets into that space for whatever reason, you can do damage to them. So it's these little floating mines that help your allies and hurt your enemies, which is really cool. And then it limits it to the proficiency bonus. So again, it's not massively overpowered in that as long as creatures are dying, they always have a use for their reaction. No, they have to choose when to use this and when it's going to be most beneficial and when it's not going to be most beneficial. But it's the reaction that is limited to a number of times to your proficiency bonus, not the little spectral flame appearing there. So the mines can appear every time a creature dies that is small or larger. But having to actually do anything is entirely based on whether or not your druid wants to use it. It also means if someone walks onto it and they're at full hit points or they just don't really need the healing, you don't have to use it. This is a brilliant example of putting in multiple balancing effects in there to make sure that it never becomes overpowered, but it's always something that's going to be a choice for them, always something that's going to be useful for them. So I love the whole thing. I think it's great. And then Blazing Revival is just another upgrade to the Wildfire Spirit. So again, for Druid homebrewing, Giving different uses for the wild shape is cool. They do it the Circle of Wildfire. They do it with the Circle of Stars, where they allow you to transform into kind of an astral form, which is super cool. It is the wild shape feature is such a cool feature that and it is so ripe for homebrewing to do different things. To go outside the realm of stuff that appears in 5th edition D&D. Hold on, versus a second. In 2nd edition, I think it was. It's either 2nd or 3rd. I believe it was 2nd edition. There was a kit for the druid called the Avenger. Kits in 2nd edition were effectively, they would replace certain aspects of the class to kind of change it. They were subclasses, but you chose them when you chose the character. And it literally would just, if you were looking at like the table for druid, it would go 3rd level ability is replaced with this, 4th level ability is replaced with this. It's kind of like Tasha's optional features that they introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, but they were, okay, you optionally can replace this with this, and that's how kits worked. And there was a druid kit called the Avenger. The Avenger shows up in 4th edition as its own class, and it's nothing like the Druid Avenger. And in 5th edition, the Vengeance Paladin is the 5th edition version of the 4th edition Avenger. And they were both really cool and really fun. I really liked the 4th edition Avenger. One of my favorite characters in 4th edition was actually an Avenger Sword Mage hybrid that just teleported everywhere. He was super fun. I think by level 6, they had like 6 different encounter-based teleports. So every encounter, they could teleport 6 different times in the encounter. It was just a massively fun, screwed up class. It was a hybrid class. It was great. Anyway, the Avenger from 2nd edition, the Druid Avenger, had some interesting things about it. Its wild shape, it could use its wild shape to turn into a sword spider, and I think at higher levels it could turn into a salamander. So 5th edition nomenclature, the wild shape, it was given 2 new forms very similar to like the elemental shape of the Circle of the Moon Druid. Same basic principle, just different creatures. And this is actually pretty common with druid kits in 2nd edition, where one of the thing a druid kit would be, okay, well your wild, your transformation, your wild form, I can't remember what they called it in 2nd edition. Anyway, your changey bits can turn you into this. And the way that it worked in 2nd edition is it would replace your base thing. So it wasn't like you had extra things you can turn into. You had a different thing you can turn into, and this was all you could turn into. In 5th edition, if you wanted to do something a little like that, again, Circle of the Moon does that in the idea that, okay, well, you can transform into more creatures, but you can still transform into everything a just base druid can transform into. Circle of the Stars kind of changes into that, where you can transform into this star form, and it has different abilities. So along that lines, if you wanted to make the Druid Avenger from 2nd edition, you could make it a form of, well, you can use one of your wild shape charges to transform into a sword spider or transform into a salamander. Pick a stat block carefully, because again, I mentioned in my last video, if you are modifying things with wild shape, understand they are still a full caster, and there are things called concentration spells that don't end when they transform shapes. So if you create something that has a massively high armor class and a really high hit point total that they can transform into, what they're going to do is they're going to cast a concentration spell that gives them actions or bonus actions that allow them to keep doing damage. Then they're going to wild shape into their super tough form. I talked about the Iron Man form before, where it was Sunbeam and Earth Elemental form, and they just go around going psh, psh, go into the ground, come up, psh, psh, go into the ground. Like it was a massively powerful combo. So understand, if you're going to give them something like that, you need to be prepared for that. The other thing that the Avenger Druid kit did in second edition is gave them access to a bunch of fire spells. Flaming Scimitar was one. I believe another was Scorching Ray. Just gave them access to all this fire stuff because the whole purpose of the Avenger was the idea of this is someone that has taken the protection of nature as a personal, or the destruction of nature as a personal affront. They are going to fight back on nature's behalf. Which is a really, really cool idea that I don't think gets explored a lot in 5th edition Druids. Druids in general are kind of pictured as these kind of benevolent things that are very much in tune with nature. And the Avenger, and that's what it was in 2nd edition. Druids in 2nd edition were limited alignment-wise. They had to be on the neutral axis somewhere. It was said lore-wise, most druids were true neutral. So they had to be neutral. Whereas the Avenger could still be neutral, but they could go, no, my neutrality is good and evil, doesn't matter. Selfless versus selfish doesn't matter. I am going I'm going to ensure that people that destroy nature are in themselves destroyed as a way of balance. And that was their whole point, is they were Avengers for nature. And it was a really cool idea. And because of that, it gave them access to all these fire spells so they could purge the things. It could be a really, really dark version of the Druid, and I loved it because of that. So again, that's another thing you need to think about homebrewing is lore and things around how the class lore-wise is designed to play, and coming up with a new motivation for a class can turn into an entire subclass. And that's what the Avenger was for the Druid. Now, going outside of D&D entirely, another kind of Druid-style character from Shadowrun, and I may be misremembering this. I thought they were called Spirit Shamans. They're just called Shamans. Shadowrun. Shadowrun is a really, really interesting thing that I incorrectly thought was actually an offshoot of 3rd edition D&D. It was made with the D20 license, open license. It's not. It's existed long before 3rd edition was even thought of. It came out in, I think, either the early 90s or late 80s. And it's a skill-based RPG. So it's not class-based, but they do have kind of quote-unquote suggested classes for people that don't want to go full-on, I'm just going to choose these random skills and turn into something. And one of those is the Shaman. Shamans got their magic from totems. Kind of very similar to the barbarian, the totem barbarian. Very similar, but a druid version of it. And the lore of the shamans in general is not quite as nature focused as the druid, but it does have that kind of flavor to it. And creating shaman was a thing in 4th edition. There was actually a shaman class, which was a flavor of druid. But I really like the shaman from Shadowrun. The entire idea behind the shaman in Shadowrun was they could use spirit summoning, which is a specific type of magic. Not so much as summoning as I bring forward a tiger, or I bring forward. No, spirit summoning is a form of magic. It's basically kind of like divine magic, or nature magic would be more appropriate. And there were a lot of different really cool things that they could do just because they were kind of linked to their totems. And so creating a totem-based druid, I think, would be really cool. 4th edition version of the druid, their spellcasting focus could be a totem because of their connection to nature. And there already exists totem barbarians. I would love to see a totem Druid, I think that could be really, really interesting. It could go the route of like the Circle of Wildfire, where their totem could manifest as a pet style thing, and then it could upgrade and just give them different abilities, very similar to the Circle of Wildfire. Or it could just give them different abilities. You know, maybe they turn into a totem form, very similar to the Circle of Stars Druid. And in that totem form, depending on the totem that they invoke, they have different abilities that they can use. Either way, it would make a really interesting, really lore-heavy, cool, fun class to play that doesn't currently exist in 5th edition to the D&D. So those are, my ideas. So, final thoughts. Overall, again, the Druid has one of the least number of subclasses of any of the classes in 5th edition currently. And that's because it is already a massively versatile class. The base flavor of Druid can already do so many different things that creating a subclass generally is just going to be, oh, well, they can already do that. We're going to make them do it better. Well, then it doesn't really feel balanced anymore because now they're a better spellcaster than a wizard whose entire defining feature is that they're the best spellcaster. So it's hard to create subclasses for the Druid because of their versatility and because of the fact that if you focus on one thing, the other aspect of the Druid is going to become overpowered or underpowered in some way, and it's remarkably hard to balance. So focusing on both of the defining features that understand no matter what you do to one, it's going to affect the other in some way is the most important thing about homebrewing for the Druid. And don't forget that there is a huge, huge resource of different ideas to kind of inspire you to create new Druid homebrews. You know, look to previous editions. Like I said, the Shaman from 4th edition was a summoner-based class, and it was a really cool one. The Avenger from 2nd edition was super, super cool. Going outside to the Shaman in Shadowrun, or looking at things from like the Fantasy Age system or other things like that. Like there's so many different kind of natural spellcaster is a trope in fantasy RPGs. And anything that has magic is going to have a natural magic source. So going to those for inspiration can lead to some really interesting, fun things. And I still think there's some stuff like we don't have a dragon version of the Druid. And I'm a huge believer in a dragon-based subclass for every class. I love dragons. It is called Dungeons and Dragons. So coming up with a dragon flavor for Druids would be really cool. But all those things should inspire you to come up with some really interesting homebrews. Just remember the defining features. And if anyone can come up with a Druidic-based subclass, I want to see it badly. Because I think that would be super, super cool. Just my brain can't come up with something like that for right now. Anyway, that's going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, turn notifications on in the comments down below. What is the most interesting flavor of Druid that you do not currently see in D&D 5th edition? Take inspiration from anywhere, but let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.